On June 24, 2019, after 240 episodes across 6 seasons, The Amazing World of Gumball ended on a freeze frame of its villain falling backwards into a hole in the floor of a school hallway. The hole was a dimension called the Void. The Void was where the show kept its mistakes. 4 years earlier, a banana with a head injury had painted that exact scene, the Wattersons running through the void. She finished the painting in January of 2015 and hung it on her wall, next to all her other paintings of things that had not yet happened. This show predicted its own ending, and the prediction is the entire show. There are 10 of these moments. 10 places where the cartoon argued with itself in public, where it broke its own rules and then refused to clean them up. Most of them were not pointed out by reviewers. Most of them were noticed by children at 3 in the morning, alone, who could not sleep, and who realized that the show was telling them something it was not allowed to say. You can walk through them in order, from the smallest one to the one that finally ate the show. They get heavier as you go. The early ones are nervous, the later ones are scared. Before the first one, a quick note: if long, slow video essays help you fall asleep, subscribing keeps these coming. It costs nothing. Now, back to it. The first of these paradoxes is the simplest, and you have to start there because everything else is built on top of it. It is the one that announces the whole problem. It airs on August 13th, 2014, in the 12th episode of the 3rd season, the 88th episode overall. It is called The Void. The plot, on the surface, is a children's adventure. A girl named Molly Collins disappears from school. Nobody remembers her. The locker that used to be hers is just a number, 116, that is missing from the wall. Gumball and Darwin notice the gap. They follow it. They find a tear in the world, they climb in. And on the other side of that tear, they find a place where everything Elmore has ever decided was a mistake has been quietly stored. Inside the Void, the show puts everything it has ever discarded. It puts laser discs and jorts and mullets. It puts a frog that resembles Crazy Frog. It puts the planet Pluto, mislabeled as Jupiter because Pluto was demoted in 2006, and that demotion was, according to the show, a mistake. It puts an early CGI design of Darwin from before the show settled on its style. It puts a wireframe of one of Nicole's 2009 sketches. It puts a chunk of the original early reel of the school. It puts characters from a fictional cartoon, How to Ratatouille Your Panda, that the show invented in a previous episode. It puts the unused concepts for the Wattersons' house. The Void is the show's behind-the-scenes folder. It is the cutting room floor. It is the space where every decision that did not survive the production process is preserved, and the show treats that space as a real place inside its own world. You have to sit with that for a moment, because it is doing something most cartoons do not do. Most cartoons hide their production. They want you to forget the artists, the studio, the rejected drafts. They want you to believe in the world. The Amazing World of Gumball does the opposite. It folds its production into the world. It says, there is a place inside this fiction where everything we tried and did not use is still real. The show contains its own waste. The show is honest about being made. But that is only the surface paradox. The deeper one is this: if the Void contains the universe's mistakes, then the Void itself must be a mistake, because the Void is part of the universe. The show has built a category for things that should not exist, and then it has put the category inside the world it is supposed to be filtering. There is no outside. There is no clean version of Elmore that the Void is filtering its mistakes out of. The Void is a room inside Elmore where Elmore stores its own contradictions, which means Elmore is, at every moment, both the show and the negation of the show. It is the world and the cancellation of that world. The two states live in the same building. The episode does not let you off the hook. At the end, when Gumball and Darwin and Mr. Small rescue Molly and crawl back out of the tear, the Void reaches up after them. It pulls in their tinfoil hats. The hats are what allowed them to remember what they had seen. Without the hats, their memories of the Void disappear. The episode ends with all 3 of them returning to school and forgetting everything they just experienced. The audience does not forget. The audience has been shown the back of the set, but the characters are reset to a state of not knowing. The show has given them a glimpse and then taken it back. And that is the first paradox of the series. The world contains its own deletion. The world cannot remember being deleted. The audience can. It is a children's adventure. It is also a thesis statement. The show is telling you, 88 episodes in, that what you are watching is a finished version of itself, and that there is a parallel version of it, hidden inside, that contains everything the finished version chose not to be. You are watching a cartoon that is aware of having been edited, and once you have seen that, you cannot unsee it. The rest of the series is going to keep showing you the seams. The thing about The Void that nobody quite says out loud is that it makes the entire show into a kind of museum. Every episode of Gumball after this one is, in a quiet way, a tour through a building that has a basement full of everything the building rejected. When you watch a normal cartoon, the rejected drafts are gone. They were never there. They lived in a notebook somewhere and were thrown away. When you watch Gumball, the rejected drafts have a room. They have a permanent address. They are still in the show. They have just been moved to the part of the show that the show pretends does not count. What does it mean for a story to know it has a basement? It means the story cannot pretend to be complete. A normal cartoon presents itself as a sealed object. This is what the world contains. There is nothing else. The amazing world of Gumball from the 88th episode forward refuses that posture. It says, this is what the world contains, and also, this is what the world refused to contain. And the refusal is part of the world too. There are no clean borders. There is no pure version of Elmore. There is only Elmore plus everything Elmore could not bring itself to be. And the second part is sitting in a closet down the hall. A child watching this episode at 11 years old will probably not articulate any of that. A child watching this episode at 11 years old will probably notice that the cheerleaders form a pyramid and then collapse and then explode. And that Mr. Small wears a tinfoil hat, and that there is a girl named Molly who has been forgotten, and that the boys go and rescue her. The plot, on the surface, is a sweet story. A girl was being forgotten. Her friends remember her. They go and bring her back. That is the surface. That is what the show is for, on the surface. The other thing, the thesis about the show containing its own deletion, is hidden underneath, and it will only become visible when you watch the rest of the series. Because the Void is going to come back. The Void is going to be the engine that drives nearly every major arc of the next 4 seasons. The Void is going to release a villain. The Void is going to be where reality gets stored when reality is bent. The Void is going to be, eventually, the mechanism by which the show ends. And once you know that the Void is in the show from episode 88 forward, you cannot watch the rest of the series without the suspicion that the show always knew where it was going. That feeling that the cartoon is operating on a longer timeline than its episodes admit to is the first feeling. Everything else builds from there. The second paradox is older than the show is. It does not come from a specific episode. It comes from the show's whole way of being seen. You notice it the first time you sit close to the screen and really look at the characters. They are not made of the same stuff. Gumball is a flat, two-dimensional drawing. He is a blue cat assembled from clean vector shapes, almost like a puppet built in Flash. His outlines sharp and his colors smooth. Darwin, his brother, is rendered the same way. Their parents look the same. The Wattersons are a family of clean two-dimensional cartoons, the kind you would expect to see in any animated comedy made after 2005. If you stopped looking there, you would think this was an ordinary cartoon. Then you pan over. Penny was, for the first 3 seasons, a peanut-shaped figure with a hard shell and a soft body. She was rendered in 2 dimensions, but with a distinctly different shading style from the Wattersons. Then, in the 20th episode of the 3rd season, called The Shell, Penny's shell breaks open. What comes out is a shape-shifting fairy creature, drawn in a softer, wetter, more luminous style, who can become a wolf or a dragon or a giant. From that moment on, Penny is a different visual register from her boyfriend. She glows. He does not. They are made of incompatible materials, and they go to school together every day, and nobody mentions it. Bobert is a robot, but he is not a drawing of a robot. He is a true 3-dimensional CGI model, rendered with reflections and metallic shading, dropped into the same frame as the 2-dimensional cat. Hector is a giant made of stop-motion clay. He moves in the small jerky way that stop-motion characters move. His limbs slightly out of sync with the digital world he occupies. Carrie is a hand-drawn ghost, sketched in a softer line than the Wattersons, almost like a shimmer that has wandered in from a different show. Anton is a piece of toast drawn on lined notebook paper, with crayon shading visible under the line work. Banana Joe is a banana drawn in a thicker, more rubber hose style, like a 1930s cartoon character that walked across the studio and into the wrong production. Tobias is a rainbow-colored figure rendered in a flat puppet style. Tina Rex, a Tyrannosaurus, is rendered in 3 dimensions but with cel-shaded outlines that try to disguise her as a drawing. And in the background of nearly every classroom shot, you can see live-action photographs. There is a kid named Idaho who is a real photograph of a potato with a face drawn on it. There is a balloon kid named Alan who appears to be a literal photograph of a balloon composited into the scene. There is a slice of pizza, photographed, walking around. There is a sentient piece of bread photographed eating lunch. There is wood. There is a leaf. There is a hot dog. They are all real objects, photographed, given eyes and a mouth, and dropped into a classroom alongside the cat, the fairy, the ghost, the dinosaur, the toast, the banana, the robot, the clay giant, the rainbow puppet, and the cartoon goldfish. They are all 12 years old. They all go to the same school. They all get the same homework. The teacher is a baboon, drawn in 2 dimensions but rendered with more detailed fur than the Wattersons, suggesting she belongs to a third visual style entirely. This is the second paradox. None of these characters belong to the same world, in the strict aesthetic sense, and yet they all live in the same world, in the strict narrative sense. They cohabit. They pass each other in hallways. They eat lunch together. The show acts like this is the most normal thing in the universe. You are supposed to read this as humor. You are supposed to laugh at the visual juxtaposition. And it is funny the first time you see a flat blue cat get into an argument with a real photograph of a banana that has had a face drawn on it. But after a while, the joke stops being a joke. After a while, you realize the show is making a point. The show is saying every one of these kids is real. Every one of these kids was made in a different way by a different process, with a different set of materials. They have different physics. They have different rules. And they all attend the same school, and they all sit at the same desks, and they all pass the same tests. And the school does not have a problem with this. If you take that at face value, the show is a metaphor for something specific. It is a metaphor for what a class of children actually looks like. When you look at them honestly, they are made of incompatible materials. They have different home lives, different bodies, different histories, different inner registers. Some of them are vivid, some of them are faint, some of them shimmer when they are happy. Some of them clank, some of them are the children of immigrants, some of them are the children of people who have always lived in this town. Some of them have been animated lovingly for years. Some of them have been pasted in from a stock photo. They all go to the same school. The show is doing the thing children's shows almost never do. It is showing you what diversity looks like when you do not flatten it. Almost every other cartoon for children draws everyone in the same style, even when those characters are different species or genders or ages. The style is a compatibility layer. The style says, even though these people are different, the show is going to render them in the same lines, so you can see they are equal. The Amazing World of Gumball refuses that compatibility layer. It says, they are different all the way down. They are different at the level of the medium, and they are still equal, and they are still friends, and they are still classmates. The equality does not come from making them look the same. The equality comes from the fact that the school treats them all as students. That is a quiet political position embedded in the visual style of a kid's show, and the show never says it out loud because saying it out loud would ruin it. The paradox of the second item is that the show is technically incoherent and emotionally coherent at the same time. There is no rule for how a flat blue cat can kiss a luminous fairy who used to be a peanut. There are no shared physics for how a stop-motion clay giant and a digital robot can sit at the same lunch table. The show simply asserts that they can, and you, as a viewer, accept it, because the alternative is to admit that this might not be possible. And the show has trained you, frame by frame, episode by episode, to believe that the impossibility is the point. The school is not a school where everyone matches. The school is a school where matching is not required. That is what makes it Elmore. That is what makes it home. If you stop looking at Gumball as a comedy and start looking at it as a thesis, this is the thesis. A world that refuses a unified visual style is asking you to believe that the unity of a community has nothing to do with how its members look, or what materials they are made of, or what laws of physics apply to them. The unity is something else. The unity is the willingness to share a hallway. That is all the show needs. The rest is allowed to be different. The third paradox is what happens when the show notices someone who was almost not there. His name is Rob, and the easiest way to understand him is to say what he was originally. Rob was nothing. Rob was a background character in the first 2 seasons of Gumball. He had a name in the production binder, Dr. Butt, and that name was a joke that never went anywhere. He showed up in crowd scenes, he had no lines. He had no plot. He was, in production terms, a filler character. He was the kind of character who exists in any animated school setting because the studio needs bodies to fill the lockers. Then, in the 11th episode of the 3rd season, an episode called The Nobody, the show did something unusual. It noticed him. It pulled him out of the background and made him a character. It gave him a goal, which was to become real. It gave him a body, which was a set of unstable polygons that flickered like a corrupted file. And then it sent him into the void, because his role in the world was so small that the universe had decided he should not exist anymore. He escaped. He escaped by grabbing the bumper of Mr. Small's van as it left the void, and the speed of the escape damaged him further. From that moment on, Rob is visibly broken. His head is too small. His body is the wrong shape. His voice is wrong. He looks at all times like a graphic that did not finish loading, like a character whose mesh got corrupted on the way back from being deleted. And the reason he looks that way is because he was deleted. And he came back anyway, and the coming back left a mark. Now follow what the show does with this. Rob, the background character who is never supposed to matter, becomes the main villain of the entire series. He becomes Gumball's nemesis. He becomes the central recurring antagonist for the next 3 seasons. He gets episodes named after him. He gets a redemption arc, then a relapse, then a final confrontation. He becomes the most narratively important character in the show after the Wattersons themselves. And the entire reason he becomes that important is that the show forgot him. This is the third paradox, and it is more uncomfortable than it sounds. The show is telling you that the way to become significant is to be erased. Rob's significance is built directly on the foundation of his insignificance. If he had been a normal character, with a normal arc, he would have remained a name in the production binder. He matters because the show tried to delete him and could not finish the job. You have to sit with the implications of that. Every cartoon ever made has discarded characters. Every animation studio has hundreds of designs that did not become anything. Every show, every season, every episode throws away more characters than it uses. Most of them stay thrown away. They go into a folder somewhere on a hard drive, and they never get pulled out, and they never get to be anything. That is the normal life of a discarded character. That is what should have happened to Rob. The show refuses that. The show says, actually, what would happen if a discarded character noticed they had been discarded? What would happen if they got angry about it? What would happen if their resentment of having been thrown away turned into a will to come back? And they came back and they were still the wrong shape because the deletion was incomplete. And they remembered the deletion and they decided someone had to pay for it? What you would get is Rob. Rob is the show's way of asking what a forgotten character would do if they could speak. And the answer the show gives is they would be furious, and they would aim their fury at the protagonist, because the protagonist is the reason there is no room for them. The hero of the story takes up all the screen time. There is none left over. The forgotten character knows this. The forgotten character understands that they were forgotten on purpose, in the structural sense, because the show could not afford to remember everyone. And the protagonist is the one who got remembered, and that means the protagonist is the enemy. In a 4th season episode called The Disaster, Rob, having gotten his hands on a remote that controls the universe, tells Gumball this directly. He says almost word for word that Gumball does not get it, that he is so happy to be the star of his own world, and that he cannot see that none of it is real. The exact line in the show's transcript is a sneering question. You really do not get it, do you? So happy to star in your amazing world? Cannot you see that none of this is real? There it is, in plain text in a children's cartoon. In 2016, the villain telling the protagonist that the protagonist is the protagonist and that the world the protagonist lives in is a fiction. And the only character who knows this is the character the fiction tried to throw away. The show is making a structural argument. The argument is that the only being in a story who can see the story for what it is a being the story tried to remove. A character who is comfortable in their role, who fits, who has lines and a backstory and a place in the credits, will never see the frame. The frame is invisible to anyone the frame is keeping. The frame becomes visible only when the frame ejects you, and then you turn around and see what you were inside of. Rob sees the frame because the frame let him fall out. He saw the back of the wallpaper. He came back, and now he knows. Gumball does not know. Gumball is the protagonist, the show is built around him, he sings a theme song, he has merchandise, he has been animated for hundreds of hours of television. He has no reason to question any of it. He is, in the strict sense, a successful character. His success is what blinds him. Rob's failure is what frees him. If you have ever wondered why the villain of a story so often seems to know more than the hero, why Vader knows things Luke does not, why the Joker sees Gotham more clearly than Batman, why so many cartoon villains have a clearer view of the moral order of their world than the heroes who oppose them, Gumball offers one answer. The villain knows because the villain has been removed and brought back. The villain has had a moment outside the story, and the hero has not. The hero has never been off camera. The villain has spent time in the cutting room. The third paradox, then, is that the most knowing character in the show is the one the show almost did not include. He sees the most because the show showed him the least. He understands the universe because the universe tried to evict him. And every time he confronts the protagonist, every time he leans in and tells Gumball that none of this is real, he is being honest in a way the show cannot let its hero be honest, because the hero is what holds the show together. And a hero who knew he was a hero would not be able to be one anymore. This is where the fourth paradox begins, and it is the largest paradox in the show. the one the show keeps circling around without ever quite resolving. The show, on more than one occasion, lets its characters know that they are inside a show. Rob is the most explicit. In The Disaster, he says it. In a later episode called The Rerun, he uses the same universal remote to manipulate the structure of the show itself, fast-forwarding through scenes, rewinding past the title card, opening up the production layer. In an even later episode called The Inquisition, he is heard late at night, alone, saying that transformation is the only chance everyone has of escaping to the other place when this world ends. He has worked out, by the end of the show, what is happening. He has worked out that the world is fictional, and that the world is going to be cancelled, and that only by becoming something else, something the show cannot contain, can any of the characters survive the cancellation. He says this to himself in an empty hallway like a man reading a fire exit sign for the first time. And then the floor opens up and he falls into the void, and the credits roll, and that is the end of the original series. But Rob is not alone. There are other characters who seem to know. Banana Barbara, the painter, paints the future. She paints scenes that have not happened yet, and they always come true. And at one point she paints a scene of the Wattersons running through the void, and that painting hangs on her wall for years before it comes true. She says in the 34th episode of the 6th season that there is no future. She says it to a man holding her hostage. He has demanded that she paint what comes next, and every time she tries, she paints static. And finally she tells him in plain words, there is no future. The show is going to end. There are smaller moments. There is an episode called The Compilation, in which the characters become aware that they are starring in a clip show. There is an episode called The Disaster, in which the title card is rewound and the intro plays in reverse. There is an episode called The Slip, in which the actors are visible behind the characters, recording the dialogue. There is an episode in which a hidden message is encoded in a game show, spelling out, letter by uncovered letter, the words, "The show ends after season 6. That message was hidden in the show 2 years before the show actually ended. And when the show was eventually revived, the producers had to admit that the message had become incorrect. The show had ended after season 6. They had said so themselves in the show, ahead of time. They had simply changed their minds later. The fourth paradox is that the show is a fiction that knows it is a fiction, that knows its end is being decided not by its characters but by the network, that knows the date on which the lease will expire, and that nonetheless continues to behave most of the time as if it does not know any of this. Gumball goes to school. Darwin goes to school. Anais does her homework. Richard eats sandwiches. Nicole loses her temper. The world spins on, with a kind of dailiness that any cartoon family possesses. And in the background of that dailiness, a banana is painting the apocalypse. A discarded character is whispering in the hallways that none of this is real, and an ad on a game show is telling anyone who is paying attention that the season currently airing will be the last. The paradox is not that the show is self-aware. Many shows are self-aware. The paradox is that the show is selectively self-aware. Some characters know, some characters do not. The protagonist does not, the villain does. The painter does, in a damaged, partial way. The teachers do not. The parents do not. The audience does because the audience has seen everything. And the show is asking at every moment why some of its inhabitants get to know and others do not. The answer, if you want one, is that knowing kills you. The character who knows the most about the show being fictional is the character the show keeps trying to delete. The painter who knows the most about the future is the character with a head injury, whose head literally explodes when she paints, and who has to wear a bow on her head to keep what is left of her brain from leaking out. Knowledge in this universe is corrupting. The more you know about the structure, the worse off you are. The characters who survive happily are the ones who stay inside the story and never look up. The protagonist is happy because the protagonist is ignorant. The villain is suffering because the villain is informed. This is, in a quiet way, an argument about happiness in general. And the show is asking you, the viewer, to think about whether you would rather be Gumball, ignorant and content, or Rob, knowing and broken. The show does not tell you which one is right. It just keeps showing you both in the same hallway on the same day and letting you choose. Most viewers will choose Gumball, because Gumball is the kind of character a viewer wants to be. But there is a small, quiet voice the show plants in you, the voice of Rob in the empty hallway saying transformation is the only way out, and that voice does not go away. Once you have heard it, you cannot stop hearing it. The show has taught you the trick of the frame, and now for the rest of your life when you watch any show or read any book or listen to any story, a small part of you will be looking for the character who has been thrown away and brought back, because that character is the one who knows. The fifth paradox is small, and the show treats it as a joke, but the implications of it are enormous, and they reach all the way back to the first season. In the fourth episode of the fourth season, an episode called The Others, Gumball and Darwin discover that there are other students in their school. This is not a joke setup. This is the actual plot. They have, at this point, been attending Elmore Junior High for more than 3 full seasons. They have been in classrooms, they have walked hallways, they have eaten in the cafeteria, and in episode 120 of the show, it is revealed that there are entire grades of students they have never noticed. The way the show explains this is unsettling. It does not say that the other students are new arrivals. It does not say that the other students were transferred in from another school. It says that Gumball is so self-centered that he literally cannot perceive anyone outside his own immediate social sphere. The other students have been there the whole time. Gumball has just been unable to see them. And because the show is told from Gumball's perspective, the audience has been unable to see them either. For 3 seasons, the show has been showing you a school that the show itself was hiding from you, because the protagonist was hiding it from himself. Then, in the same episode, you learn something even stranger. Gumball's younger sister Anais is 4 years old. She has been 4 years old since the first episode of the first season. Gumball is 12. Darwin is 10. They are all in the same grade together, which is to say that a 4-year-old and a 12-year-old are sitting in the same classroom, doing the same homework, taking the same teacher. And Anais is, in the language of the show, in the 8th grade. She is 2 years ahead of her older brothers. The show treats this as a punchline. The character delivering the line treats it as if it has always been obvious. But you, the viewer, sit there and realize that the timeline has never made any sense. How old is Gumball exactly? He is 12. He has been 12 for at least 4 years of real-world airtime. How old is Darwin? He is 10. He has been 10 for the same length of time. Anais has been 4 for that long and is also the most academically advanced character in the family, capable of college-level reading and analysis. Richard, the father, is in his 40s. Nicole, the mother, is in her 40s. None of them age. None of them celebrate birthdays. None of them advance grades. The world is fixed. The world is also somehow in motion. They go to school every day. They have new experiences. They date in the case of Gumball and Penny. They make friends. They lose friends. They have feelings. And none of it changes the numbers next to their names. This is the 5th paradox, and it is a paradox you can find in almost any long-running cartoon. The Simpsons have it. SpongeBob has it. It is the structural fact of cartoon life, that characters do not age, that birthdays do not accumulate, that 12 is always 12. But Gumball is the only show in this category that points it out and then refuses to clean it up. The Others does not say, sorry, we have been hiding the rest of the school from you, and from now on, we will show it all the time. The Others points out the absurdity, lets it land, and then moves on. The next episode goes back to ignoring the rest of the school. The protagonists return to their bubble. Anais goes back to being a 4-year-old in the 8th grade who appears in her older brother's classroom whenever the plot requires it, and not at all the rest of the time. The implication, if you take it seriously, is that Elmore is not a place. Elmore is a perception. It is whatever the show is currently looking at. When the show looks at Gumball's classroom, that classroom is the world. When the show looks at Anais's classroom, that becomes the world. When the show stops looking, the classroom does not continue to exist in the background. It blinks off. It returns when needed. This is mechanically how cartoons work. They render what is on camera. Off camera does not exist until the camera turns. Most cartoons do not admit this. Gumball admits it in The Others and then keeps living that way. The deeper implication, and this is the one the show keeps poking at, is that the protagonist's perception of the world is the world. Gumball does not see the rest of the school, so the rest of the school is not there. When he opens his perception, the school appears. When he closes it, the school disappears again. He is, in a loose sense, the engine of his own universe. His attention is what summons the rest of the cast. His ignorance is what dismisses them. This connects, in a way the show never makes explicit, to the question of why Rob the villain is so angry. Rob is angry because the protagonist's attention is what determines what exists. Rob was forgotten because the protagonist did not look at him. Rob was sent to the void because the universe agreed with the protagonist. The show is, in this reading, an argument about the moral cost of being the center of attention. The protagonist is generous and kind and well-meaning, and the protagonist is also a black hole for narrative significance. He sucks the screen time out of every other character. They get crumbs. They get cameos. They get a single line, sometimes, in an episode that is, otherwise, about Gumball. And the show, in The Others, comes out and says it. There are dozens of other students, they have lives. Some of those lives are more interesting than yours, Gumball. The show offers Claire Cooper, a depressed girl whose family is moving to Detroit, as evidence. Claire is a fully formed character with an inner life, and the show says, look, here she has been the whole time. You just have not been able to see her. Now look. Now see her. And then, of course, Gumball cannot help himself. He hijacks her story. He turns her sad ending into a forced happy ending. He uses Tina Rex to flip her bus over and then crowns her prom queen. He cannot stand to let a story exist that is not about him. The show points this out gently. It does not punish him for it, it just lets it happen. And lets you, the viewer, sit with the fact that the protagonist's worldview is an illness the show has trained you to share. The fifth paradox, in plain words, is that you cannot have a protagonist without making the rest of the world thinner. The protagonist is the part of the world that the camera attends to. The rest of the world is correspondingly under-rendered. The Amazing World of Gumball is honest about this in a way most stories are not. It admits that its world has a center. It admits that being at the center distorts everything around you. It admits that being away from the center, being one of the thinly rendered ones, is its own kind of injury. And then it goes back to telling stories about the center, because that is what stories do. The injury is the format. The sixth paradox is the smallest and the strangest, and it has to do with continuity, with what counts as canon in a show that has explicitly said that its own discarded material is a real place inside its own universe. In the 20th episode of the third season, the 96th episode overall, the episode called The Shell, Penny breaks out of her shell. The shell breaks during a school play. Penny emerges as a luminous, shape-shifting fairy. She and Gumball share their first real kiss. The episode ends with Penny, in her new form, embraced by Gumball, and the show pointedly indicates that this transformation is permanent. She is not going back inside the shell. Her family is upset about it. Her father wants her to stop. But she has chosen, and the show has chosen, and the world has changed. Now, look at the next several episodes. Look at Season 4. Look at Season 5. Penny appears in dozens of episodes after the shell. In most of them, she is in her unshelled fairy form, glowing and shapeshifting and cuddling with Gumball. In some of them, she is wearing the shell again. In an episode called The Countdown, she has the shell. In an episode called The Mirror, she has the shell. In an episode called The Silence, she has the shell. In an episode called The Decisions, she has the shell. There is a flashback in The Climb where she has the shell, which is fair, because flashbacks are flashbacks. There is a photo in the one where she has the shell, which is also fair, because photos are photos. But the 4 other episodes are not flashbacks or photos. They are episodes set in the present of the show. They are episodes that air after the shell. They are episodes in which Penny, who has permanently broken out of her shell and become a fairy, is wearing the shell again, with no explanation, as if the transformation never happened. The fandom calls these errors. The official position is that they are mistakes. They are continuity slips. They are episodes that were animated before the production team finished the new design, or that were animated in a hurry, or that were storyboarded by people who did not realize the change had been ratified. They are, in the language of the show itself, mistakes, which means, by the logic the show established in episode 88, they belong in the void. The void is where the universe stores its mistakes. The void contains Laserdiscs and Jorts and Pluto. The void also, by extension, contains every continuity error the show ever made. The void is the home of the wrong version of Penny, the version where the shell came back. The void is the home of every animation mistake, every audio glitch, every misread closed caption, every moment where the wrong character was credited as voicing another character. There is a real moment in the credits of The Inquisition where one voice actor is incorrectly credited for the voice of another character. That credit is wrong. That credit is, in the show's own theology, in the void. You can keep extending this. The void is where every dropped storyline lives. The void is where every redesigned character lives, in their old design. Darwin's original CGI design is in the void. The show showed it to you, in the episode called The Void Itself. Micole's old 2009 sketch is in the void. The early reel of the school is in the void. So every character's earliest version is in the void by canon. Penny's old shelled form after she broke the shell becomes a void object. Every time it reappears in an episode, the void is leaking. The shell is appearing where it should not. The mistake is climbing back up out of the basement and into the show. This is the sixth paradox. The show has built a metaphysical category for its own continuity errors. The void is not just a plot device. The void is the show's theory of canon. Anything the show wishes had not happened goes to the void. The void contains it. The void cannot release it, except by accident. And every accident, every slip-up, every episode where Penny has her shell again when she should not, is the show admitting that the void is closer to the surface than the show would like. You can see this as charming, or as eerie, or as both at once. It is charming because the show has given itself a theology of error. It has decided that mistakes are real, and that they live somewhere, and that the somewhere has a name, and the name is mentioned in the show. It is eerie because once you have accepted the theology, every continuity error becomes evidence. Every time you spot something that does not fit, you are seeing the void at work. The world is leaking. The mistakes are coming back. In a different show, this would just be sloppiness. In a different show, the audience would shrug at a mismatched design and move on. In Gumball, you cannot move on because the show has explicitly said, there is a place inside this world where things that should not be are kept. So when you see the shell is not a mistake. The shell is a void object that is surfaced. The animation team did not catch it in time. The barrier between the world and its discarded versions is thinner than the show pretends. This is the part of the paradox that nobody talks about. The void is leaky. The show admits by its own behavior that it cannot keep its mistakes in the basement. They wander up, they appear in episodes, they get away with being there because nobody on screen is looking. The audience notices. The audience always notices, and the audience is, in a sense, the only character in the show who can confirm what the void contains, because the audience is the one who remembers the previous episode, who knows that the shell broke, who can compare the present scene to the established canon. The audience is the show's archive. The show's official archive is the void. The void is leaky, therefore the audience, in a kind of round-the-loop way, is the entity in charge of confirming what the show is and is not. The audience holds the canon. The show admits this indirectly by every continuity error it commits. The audience is what makes the canon real. This is a paradox in two directions. It says that the show cannot keep its own past straight. It also says that the audience is part of the show's machinery, that the audience's attention is what enforces canon, that without the audience, there is no canon at all. The show needs you in order to be coherent. The show is not coherent without you. The void is the proof. The seventh paradox does not look like a paradox at first. It looks like a sitcom premise. It is the question of how the Watterson family survives. Richard Watterson, the father, does not have a job. This is a recurring fact of the show. There is an episode called The Job in which he tries to get a job and fails immediately. There is a recurring gag where he refuses to get out of bed. He is, in his own words, a stay-at-home dad, but he is not the kind of stay-at-home dad who manages the household. Nicole, the mother, works. She works at the Rainbow Factory doing what appears to be middle management labor under a tyrannical boss named Mr. Yoshida. She is the only earner in the family. She makes, presumably, a working-class wage. The Wattersons live in a two-story suburban house in Elmore. They have a backyard, they have a garage, they have a car, often more than one car, and the cars are often crashed and replaced. They have a fish tank until Darwin grows legs and leaves it. They have a kitchen, a bathroom, a basement, a driveway. They have, in other words, the basic equipment of a comfortable middle-class existence. They have 3 children, they have utilities, they have groceries. They are also, according to the show itself, broke. There is an episode called The Money, in which the family runs out of money entirely. There are episodes in which they cannot afford specific things, a doctor, a vacation, a piece of equipment, and the plot of those episodes is built around the lack. The show acknowledges that they are not financially stable. The show acknowledges that Richard does not contribute. The show acknowledges that Nicole's salary is not really enough. So how do they live in a 2-story house? How do they keep the lights on? How do they keep replacing the cars? How does Anais get tutored? How does Gumball afford whatever he affords? How does the family take vacations? How does anything add up? The answer is that nothing adds up. The show is not interested in the answer. The show is interested in the fact that the family appears to live in a house that, on the show's own account, they cannot afford. And this is the 7th paradox, and the 7th paradox is, in some ways, the most American paradox in the show. It is the paradox of the suburban middle-class fantasy. It is the paradox of the sitcom family. The sitcom family always has more than they should. The sitcom family is always in a house that is too big for the salary that is implied. The sitcom family always has, somehow, enough. What Gumball does that other sitcom families do not is point this out. The Wattersons are aware of being broke. They talk about it. They have plot points about it. The show puts the contradiction on the table. It says, this family does not have enough money to be living the life they are living, and they are living it anyway, and we are not going to pretend the gap does not exist. The reason the gap exists is, of course, the format. Cartoons need a stable home base, the Wattersons need a house. The house has to be visible, drawable, recurring. The show has decided that the house has to be a particular size and a particular layout because that is what cartoon houses look like. Whether or not the family can afford the house is a question outside the show. The show is not produced from inside Elmore. The show is produced from outside Elmore by a company in London called Cartoon Network Studios Europe. On a production budget, the house has to be there because the production has decided the house has to be there. The fact that the family cannot afford it is a fact about Elmore. The fact that the family has it anyway is a fact about the production. The paradox is that the show makes you see both layers at once. You see the family that cannot afford its house, and you see the show that has decided the family will have a house anyway. You see, in other words, the gap between the world the show is depicting and the production constraints that are forcing the depiction. The show has stretched its own internal logic to accommodate its external requirements, and the stretch is visible. You can see the scene. You can extend this. The Wattersons need to all be in the same school because the show needs them in the same school. So Anais is in the 8th grade at 4 years old. The show needs Penny to remain Gumball's love interest, so Penny does not move away, even though her family in the shell is shown to be on the verge of moving her to a different school district. The show needs Rob to come back, so Rob comes back every time, even when the previous episode left him in a state from which return was not really plausible. There is a moment in the recap of the disaster's follow-up where the show admits, in a knowing aside, that there is no explanation for why Rob is free now after having been arrested at the end of the bus. The show says basically the prison was made of cardboard. The prison was made of cardboard because the show needed Rob outside the prison, and the prison existed only as long as the show needed Rob inside it. This is the 7th paradox, the paradox of plot necessity. The world of Elmore is not a coherent simulation. The world of Elmore is a stage. The stage has props. The props are present when the show wants them and absent when the show does not. The Wattersons have a house because the show needs them to have a house. They cannot afford the house because the show wants you to know they cannot afford it. The contradiction is not resolved. The contradiction is performed. The show is, in a way, asking you to think about every other sitcom family you have ever watched, and to notice that they too cannot afford their houses, and that nobody asked the question. Gumball asks the question. Then it does not answer it. Then it goes back to the house, and the next episode happens. And you watch the next episode, and you do not bring up the rent. Most cartoons hide the production. Gumball folds the production into the world. The 7th paradox is that the production is visible, and the world has been built around the production, and the world is therefore not really a world. It is a stage that has been dressed to look like a world, and the show, somewhere inside it, knows. The void knows, the painter knows. The audience knows. Only the protagonist and his family seem oblivious to the question, and that is partly because if the protagonist knew, the show would not be able to continue. Ignorance is the engine. Ignorance is what allows the next episode to begin. The 8th paradox is older than the show. It is older than cartoons. It is one of the oldest paradoxes in storytelling, and it is the one the Greeks built half their tragedies out of. It is the paradox of the self-fulfilling prophecy, and Gumball, in the 31st episode of the 3rd season, an episode called The Oracle, builds an entire half-hour around it. Banana Barbara, the mother of Banana Joe, is a painter. Her paintings, the show establishes, predict the future. The first hint of this comes in The Shell, where one of her hidden paintings shows Gumball naked at a mall. That painting becomes the trigger for The Oracle, which aired in January of 2015, in which the family discovers her predictive ability and tries to prevent the painting from coming true. The painting shows Gumball naked in the mall, surrounded by a specific configuration of people and weather. There is a man with a balloon, there is a kid on a scooter, there is a sudden weather event that the show calls raining raccoons. Each element is small. Each element is, on its own, harmless. The total configuration, however, is what the painting predicts Gumball spends the episode trying to prevent any of it from happening. He avoids the mall. He avoids the kid with the balloon. He covers his clothes more carefully, and every action he takes to avoid the painting causes the painting to come a little closer to true. He goes to the mall by accident. He encounters the kid with the balloon by accident. The weather happens. By the end of the episode, every element of the painting except the nudity has come true. Gumball, faced with the inevitability of the painting, decides to take the last step himself. He pulls off his own clothes, on his own terms, and the painting becomes true at the moment he stops trying to prevent it. The episode ends with Anais asking the question that defines the 8th paradox. She asks whether any of this would have happened if they had not seen the painting. She asks whether the painting was predicting the future or causing it. The show does not answer. The show ends with Banana Barbara painting another painting, this one of the entire Watterson family running through the void. And the painting is in static, and Barbara turns to the camera and smiles. The episode is over. The painting is hung on the wall. Years pass. The painting is still hanging. Episodes continue. The painting ages on the wall. Then, in the final episode of the original series, 4 years later, the family runs through the void, exactly as the painting predicted, and the prediction comes true. The eighth paradox is what every viewer eventually has to confront. Did the painting cause the ending? Or did the ending cause the painting? In the strict logic of the show, the painting was made first. It was hung on the wall. The ending happened later. The painting predicted the ending. But in the logic of the show's production, the writers knew the ending. They put the painting in early, knowing what they were going to do. The painting was a clue, planted in advance. For the audience point of view, the painting predicts the ending. From the production's point of view, the ending was decided first, and the painting was reverse engineered to match. You can hold both readings at once. The show is doing both. It is, on its surface, a story about a banana whose paintings predict the future. It is, underneath, a confession by the writers that they planted the ending early. And the question Anais asks, whether any of it would have happened if they had not seen the painting, is the question the writers are asking the audience. Would any of this matter if you had not seen the early hint? Would the ending land if the painting had not been hanging on the wall for 4 years? Would you, the viewer, feel the closure you feel if the show had not made you wait that long? The answer the show seems to give is that the prediction is the thing. Stories do not work without prediction. Every good story plants its ending early. Every good story rewards rewatching, because the second time through, you can see all the planted hints. The painting is the show being honest about how stories work. Stories are predictions that come true on schedule. The schedule is the part the audience does not see. The painting is the schedule made visible. This connects to a deeper question which the show never quite asks but keeps gesturing at. Are the characters in the show free, or are they following a schedule? When Gumball tries to avoid the painting, is he choosing freely, or is he being moved through the steps the writers have already drawn? Are any of his decisions his? Every step he takes makes the painting more true. Every decision he makes from his perspective is a free decision. From the audience's perspective, every decision is a step toward the predicted outcome. He thinks he is choosing. The show knows he is not. The eighth paradox is the paradox of the script. The characters are scripted. The script is the painting. The script knows what is going to happen. The characters inside the script do not know. They behave as if they are free. They are not. And the show is telling you, gently, that this is a feature of all stories, not just this one. Every character in every story is following a painting that has already been painted. The story works because the characters cannot see the painting. The story works because the writers can. You, the viewer, are between the two. You can see the painting because the show has shown it to you. You can see the characters because the show is showing them to you. You sit in the seat of the painter. You watch the prediction unfold. And the strangeness, the gentle vertigo of watching a self-fulfilling prophecy land on schedule is one of the oldest pleasures in storytelling. The Oracle is Gumball's version of that pleasure. The Oracle lets you sit in the painter's chair and watch the cat work his way toward a prediction he cannot see. By the time the painting comes true, 4 years and 100+ episodes later, you have almost forgotten it. The forgetting is what makes the landing work. The eighth paradox is that the prediction has to be hidden in plain sight. It has to be visible enough to count when it lands. It has to be invisible enough during the wait to feel like a surprise. The painting on the wall is the show doing this trick. The painting is on the wall the whole time. You see it in the background of episodes. You do not register it. Then it happens. Then you remember. Then the episode you watched 4 years earlier rearranges itself in your memory, and you realize the show told you what it was going to do. And you missed it, and missing it was part of the design. The ninth paradox is what the painting started, and what the painting becomes when the painter cannot finish it. In the 34th episode of the 6th season, in May of 2019, the show airs an episode called The Future. The plot is straightforward, on the surface. Banana Barbara has been kidnapped. Her son, Banana Joe, asks Gumball and Darwin for help finding her. They search. Meanwhile, the kidnapper, who is Rob, is forcing Barbara to paint the future, because Rob wants to know what is coming. Rob has, in his understanding of the show, figured out enough to want more. He wants the painter to tell him what the ending will be. Barbara paints. Every painting she produces, when she is told to paint the future, comes out as static. Just static. A field of fuzz. No image. No content. Static. Rob is furious. He throws the paintings away. He demands she try again. She tries again. Static. He demands she paint properly. Paint a real future. Paint anything. She paints static. At the end of the episode, after Gumball and Darwin have rescued her, Barbara walks past Gumball as he is leaving. He calls out a farewell. He says, "See you in the future, Rob." Barbara turns to him slowly. She smiles. She says, almost to herself, but loud enough to be heard, the line that closes the episode and that the show never explains. But there is no future. The screen, the moment after she says it, fills with static. In the static, for one frame, you can see the face of Superintendent Evil, the antagonist, who will destroy the world in the finale. He is not in this episode. He has not been introduced. He is just suddenly there, in the static, watching. The episode ends. The ninth paradox is what Barbara has just confessed. She is the painter of the future. Her paintings have always come true. When she tries to paint what comes after this point in the show, she paints nothing. She paints static. She says there is no future, and the static she has been painting has been showing up in the show's other prophetic paintings for years, including the painting of the Wattersons running through the void, where the void in the painting was depicted as a field of static. The static is the future. The static is also the absence of a future. The paradox is that the show's most reliable prophet is now telling you that there is nothing left to prophesy. The schedule has run out. The painter has no more paintings. The world she has been predicting is not going to continue past this point. In production terms, this is the show telling you that it has been canceled. Season 6, the writers knew, was the last season. They had been told. They had hidden the message in the vegging, where the game show panels spell out the show ends after season 6. They had hidden the message earlier. Now in the future, they are being explicit about it. The painter cannot paint a future because there is no future to paint. The world is being shut down, the painter's tools no longer work because the world her tools were tuned to is going to stop. You can see the show in two ways at this point. You can see it as a fiction that has run out of imagination, a fiction whose internal prophet has gone blind, or you can see it as a fiction that knows it is a fiction and that knows the production company has decided to end it, and that has chosen to fold this knowledge into its plot. The second reading is the one the show is asking you to take. The painter knows the show is ending. The painter is the show's voice for the production team. The painter is telling you, in plain language, in a sentence, Banana Barbara delivers with a smile, that there is no future. What is heavier about this is what comes after. Barbara delivers her line. The screen turns to static. Superintendent Evil's face appears in the static. He is the upcoming antagonist. The static is not just absence. The static contains the next thing. The static is what is left when the future is gone, but the static is also what the next thing emerges out of. Which means there is, in fact, a future. The future is the cancellation of the show. The future is the entity that will arrive to dismantle the world. The future is Superintendent Evil. The future is the show's awareness of its own ending, given a face. The ninth paradox, then, is that there both is and is not a future. There is no future for the world inside the show because the show is going to end. There is, however, a future event in the production sense. A final episode, a series finale, an arrival of the cancellation force. The painter cannot paint that future because that future is not part of the world. That future is the world ending. The world cannot contain its own ending. The world can only see its ending as static. And in that static, briefly the cancellation appears. Just a face, just a hint. Just the show telling you in one frame that the agent of the ending is real, and that he is coming, and that he has a face, and that the face is human, because cancellation is a human decision. A network executive somewhere has decided the show cannot draw that decision in any of the styles it normally uses. It can only show it as static, with a man's face barely visible inside the static. That is what the end of a cartoon looks like, from the inside. It looks like a wall of fuzz with a person's face peeking out. This is one of the most quietly devastating moments in any children's animation. It is a banana with a head injury in a junkyard telling the show's villain that there is no future. It is the show admitting on screen, in plain language, in the middle of an otherwise comedic episode, that it knows it is dying. It is the show saying goodbye 3 episodes early in a sentence that the average viewer will register as a punchline and that the careful viewer will register as a confession. If you go back and rewatch The Oracle after watching the future, the painting in the background of Banana Barbara's house, the one that depicts the Watterson family running through the void, looks different. It is not just a prediction anymore. It is a deadline. It has been on the wall since 2015. It has been waiting. The show has been working its way toward it for 4 years. And now the painter has stopped painting because the deadline is the only thing left to paint. And once you have painted the deadline, there is nothing to paint after it. There is no future. The painter cannot paint it. The villain cannot extract it. The protagonist cannot avoid it. The show, in its final stretch, is going to walk into the painting it set up 4 years earlier, on its own terms, with the slow and steady gait of a piece of art that has known where it was going from the start. This brings you to the last of these paradoxes, and the heaviest one, and the one that took the show 6 years to even partly resolve. On June 24th, 2019, in the 44th episode of the 6th season, the show aired its 240th episode. The episode was called The Inquisition. The plot of the episode is simple, on the surface, and devastating. Underneath, a man arrives at Elmore Junior High. He is a school superintendent named Superintendent Evil, and he is the only character in the entire run of the show, with the partial exception of a brief gag in an earlier episode, who is rendered as a real live-action human being. He is not a drawing. He is not a 3D model. He is a photograph of a man composited into the cartoon. He is the cancellation made visible. He announces in the school auditorium that he is going to stamp out the cartoonish ways of the students. He is going to make them normal. He is going to make them human. He is going to undo the visual diversity that the show has spent 8 years building. He targets specific characters first. Terry, the paper bear, has her face erased. Alan, the balloon, is forced to grow a body. The students are systematically transformed, one by one, into live-action human beings. The visual style of the show, the very thing that has been the show's central identity since episode 1, is being deleted on screen by a man in real time in front of the students. Gumball and Darwin try to fight him. They are mostly outmatched. Tina Rex, the dinosaur, knocks the superintendent down at one point and reveals that he is a disguise, that there is something underneath, but the episode does not stay long enough on that reveal. The episode is more interested in the steady transformation of the cast. 15 characters in the course of one episode are turned into live-action humans. The school becomes, briefly, a school full of real people. The cartoon becomes, briefly, not a cartoon. And in the middle of this, in a hallway off-camera from the main action, Rob is alone. Rob is the villain, but in this episode, he is also a kind of prophet. He has been knocked unconscious earlier. He wakes up in an empty hallway. He stands up, he says to himself that transformation is the only chance everyone has of escaping to the other place when this world ends. He has worked it out. He understands the transformation Superintendent Evil is performing is, in his read, the only way out. To become human in this show is to become a thing the show cannot contain. The show is a cartoon. A live-action human is outside the show's medium. By transforming, the characters are escaping into a space the show cannot follow them into. The cancellation is a doorway, in Rob's reading, not a wall. He says this to himself in an empty hallway. He says it like a man reading an exit sign in a fire. And then the floor under him cracks. The void opens up beneath him. He grabs at the edge. He cannot hold on. The piece of floor he is holding moves away. He realizes as he says it out loud that the disaster he has been trying to prevent has started. He says, in horror, the line that the show closes on. Oh no, it started. He falls. The image freezes, the credits roll, the show ends. That is how the original series concludes. There is no resolution, there is no rescue, there is no goodbye. The villain falls into the void begins to swallow the world, and the show stops, mid-collapse, in the middle of the disaster it has been predicting for years. The painting is coming true, the show is being cancelled, the void is doing what the void was always going to do. For the next 2,226 days, that was the ending. 6 years and 1 month, almost to the day. 6 years of fans assuming the cliffhanger would never resolve. 6 years of the painting on Banana Barbara's wall remaining unfulfilled because the Watterson family had not yet been shown running through the void. Rob was in there. The void was reaching up into the school. The world was ending. But the show had stopped. Whatever was supposed to come next had not been animated, and might never be animated, and the cliffhanger sat there for 6 years like a sentence with no period. And here is the 10th paradox, the heaviest one, the one that closes the loop. In 2025, the show came back. It came back under a different name, called The Wonderfully Weird World of Gumball, on Hulu, with the same creative team and the same characters, and a new episode count. It came back in production terms because the network changed its mind. The cancellation, which had been final, was reversed. 6 years after the show ended in the void, the show was lifted out of the void and given more episodes, and asked to continue. And in the season finale of the revival, an episode called The Rewrite, the show finally returned to the cliffhanger. Barbara's painting came true, but in a way that was different from what the painting had implied. Rob was rescued from the Void. The Void was explained, finally, in the show's own words. The Void the show told you was the mechanism by which the show would end if it were cancelled, or if the main characters figured out they were fictional. The Void, in other words, was the show's own awareness of its mortality. The Void had always been there because the show had always known it could die. The Void was the production budget made visible. The Void was the network's hand, drawn into the world. And then the show went on. There were more episodes, there is a second season, there has been a renewal for a third and a fourth. The show that ended in the Void has, somehow, kept going. The Void did not turn out to be the ending. The Void turned out to be a station the show could pass through and come out of. The cliffhanger was not, after all, the final word. The painting was not, after all, the last image. The show that knew it was being cancelled was wrong about being cancelled. Or, more precisely, it was right at the time, and then the world changed, and now it is wrong, and now there is more. The 10th paradox is that an ending is never the end. In this show or in any show, the Void exists. The Void is real in the show's metaphysics. Falling into the Void is supposed to be permanent, but the show's own behavior demonstrates that the Void is escapable, that the Void releases its inhabitants when the production team decides it should. Rob escaped. Molly escaped. Now the entire world has, in a sense, escaped. The cancellation that was supposed to be final has been reversed. The painting that was supposed to be the deadline has become a chapter heading. The show has used its own metaphysics to argue gently that no ending is permanent until the very last episode. And the very last episode does not exist yet because the show is still being made. There is something almost theological about this. The show is, in a quiet way, a story about the possibility of resurrection. The Void looks like death. The Void is in any normal narrative where things go to never come back, but Gumball's Void is leaky. Things come back, characters come back, continuity errors come back, the shell comes back when the shell should be gone, Rob comes back from being deleted, the show itself comes back from being cancelled. The Void is real, but the Void is not absolute. Time passes, the basement is opened. Things that were thought lost are, sometimes, found again, sitting on a workbench somewhere, slightly damaged from the trip, but still recognizable, still themselves. You watch the original series finale. Today, knowing what you know about the revival, and the freeze frame of Rob falling into the Void no longer feels like an ending. It feels like a pause. The show paused there for 6 years and then resumed. The painting that depicted the Wattersons in the Void has now been completed. The deadline has been met, and on the other side of the deadline, the show is still going. The painter, Banana Barbara, was right that there was no future, in the sense that the future she could see ended at that point. She was wrong, or at least incomplete, in the sense that there has been a future after all, just one she could not paint. The painter could not paint past the cancellation, because the cancellation was the wall of her paintings. But the show, which is larger than its painter, has gone past the cancellation, into a new room, with new walls. The 10 paradoxes do not resolve. None of them is solved by the show. The Void still exists. The animation styles are still incompatible. Rob is still the only character who knows, mostly. The fourth wall is still selectively transparent. Anais is still 4. Penny still occasionally has her shell. The Wattersons still cannot afford their house. The painter still paints the future. There is still no future, except that there now is. The series finale was still the finale, except that there is now a series after the finale. What you have, instead of resolution, is the picture of a show that has spent its entire run noticing its own contradictions and refusing to clean them up. Most cartoons hide their seams. Gumball walked you through them. Most cartoons pretend their world is closed. Gumball folded its production into its world and asked you to live with the strangeness. Most cartoons end. Gumball ended, and then refused to end, and used its own metaphysics to justify the refusal. If you watch the show casually, you will laugh at it. The jokes are excellent. The rhythm is sharp. The characters are charming. You will see a banana, a cat, a fairy, a robot, a clay giant, a piece of toast, and a slice of pizza going to school together, and you will find it funny, and you will find it sweet, and you will move on with your life. That is the surface. The surface is what most people see. The surface is, in some ways, the whole point of the show. But underneath the surface, underneath the bright colors and the gentle pacing and the silly voices, the show is doing something more careful. It is testing how much honesty a children's cartoon can bear. It is asking how much of the production can be visible inside the production, how much of the canceling can be visible inside the canceled work, how much of the editing can be visible inside the edit. It is asking whether a story can know itself, and the answer it gives, slowly, episode by episode, is that a story can know more about itself than most stories choose to admit. It just hurts a little when it does. It looks like a banana with a head injury saying there is no future. It looks like a villain whispering in an empty hallway that none of this is real. It looks like a freeze frame on a black hole that takes 6 years to open back up. That is the amazing world of Gumball. That is what you have been watching. 10 paradoxes, gently arranged in a show that pretended to be about a blue cat and a goldfish brother, and a 4-year-old sister and a school full of mismatched friends. The cat is, of course, the protagonist. He never knows, he is happy. He goes to school, he kisses his fairy girlfriend, he fights with his sister, he loves his parents. He is, in the strict sense, the engine of his own ignorance. He is fine. The painting is on the wall. The show began with the painting on the wall. The show is still on the wall in some form today. The painter said there is no future. She was right and she was wrong. She painted static, and inside the static, a face was waiting. The face transformed her world. Her world fell into the void. And then, 6 years later, a different team of people opened the void and pulled the world back out. And now the world is going on. And now the painter, presumably, is painting again. Because there is now, again, a future to paint. 6 years, 2,226 days, sat between the freeze frame and the answer. That is how long a show in this medium can live in the void. That is how long an ending can be paused. That is what it looks like when a cartoon argues, in its own quiet way, that nothing is ever really over until the very last person who cared about it has stopped caring. And that as long as someone is still watching, the painter can keep painting. And the cat can keep going to school, and the cancellation, the live-action man with the human face, can be put back into his disguise, and the world can be put back together. And the next morning, everyone can wake up and find that they are still cartoons after all. If anything in this stayed with you, subscribing helps the channel keep making more like it. Sleep well. See you next time.